I've never really visited this sub before, but I wanted to share this story with someone. I really can't find a reasonable explanation for what happened that night. It was just a strange and alarming experience. This all happened a few months ago. My friend had heard that the northern lights might be visible in our area, and asked if I wanted to go for a drive out into the country to see if we could catch a glimpse. So, we headed out after dark and drove for a while, putting the city behind us and winding out into the countryside, all the while scanning the skies and just searching for a good vantage point where the stars and the lights might be visible. But several hours passed, and with nothing to show for our efforts, we started to give up on seeing the lights altogether. As we discussed what to do next at that point, my friend noted that we were close to her hometown, and reminded me that she had been wanting to visit the local cemetery to find the graves of some of her distant relatives. She'd recently been researching her genealogy. It was a clear, warm night, and we were both pretty disappointed that we hadn't seen the lights, and we both wanted to make the trip worthwhile. So, we agreed to swing by the cemetery. We pulled into the dirt road adjacent to the cemetery and walked around until we found the right graves. She took some photos, and we decided to just wander around for a little while. My friend was leading the way, using the flashlight on her phone to light the paths, and to ensure that we didn't accidentally step on any of the graves. I'd been feeling incredibly anxious since we had arrived, which struck me as a bit odd. I've done several cemetery seriation projects as an archaeologist, and I don't normally feel nervous in cemeteries, even at night. I usually find that cemeteries are pretty peaceful and calming, but I felt really strange in that particular graveyard. I found myself frequently spinning around because I felt like someone was standing behind me. Still, I just chalked it up to general anxiety and tried not to dwell on it. One of the problems with having an anxiety disorder is that it's sometimes hard to tell when your nervousness is justified. Even in retrospect, I don't know if my anxiety was just in my head, or if it was related to what would happen next. After wondering for a while, we realized that it was approaching 1 a.m., and that we should probably get back home. We turned back and headed toward the car. My friend's car was in sight, and she was a few yards ahead of me when it happened. I suddenly got a wave of that nervous feeling again, and thought that I heard someone running up behind me. I was starting to turn my head to look back when I felt something collide with my back, the initial impact hitting me right between the shoulder blades. There was substantial weight behind it, as if someone had actually hurtled into me. The impact was so forceful that I was thrown forward and I fell flat on my face. And as I scrambled to get back up, I felt the weight pressing into my shoulders again and was shoved back down. I then glanced up to see my friend running towards me. She had also heard someone running up to us, had heard my initial fall, and then turned around just in time to see me being pushed back down. She would later tell me that she had seen my sweatshirt flattening against my back and shifting, as if someone had been pressing their hand against my shoulders. She grabbed my arm to pull me up just as the weight disappeared, and we both bolted to the car, jumping in and instinctively locking the doors. She wasted no time starting the engine, and then hastily peeled out of the parking lot. As soon as we hit the main road, we just sped away from there as quickly as possible. We drove for several minutes without saying a word. I think we were both stunned and, more than anything, confused. She finally glanced at me and said, "What the hell just happened?" I didn't quite know how to answer that. I told her that someone had shoved me to the ground, and she said, I know, I saw, but what was that? There was nothing there. We tried to come up with a rational explanation, but none of them made any sense. Had someone ambushed me and bolted? Definitely not. We would have seen them. Had I tripped? No. I had definitely felt something pushing me, and my friend had seen me being shoved back down. Had it just been the wind? Not possible. There hadn't been so much as a breeze that night. And if there had been some freak gust of wind, it would have hit my friend too. Perhaps an animal had attacked me? But that didn't seem possible either. There were no local animals large enough, strong enough, and stealthy enough to topple a full-grown human without being seen. I had been in full view of my friend, illuminated by her flashlight during the second fall, and the weight had remained at my shoulders even though she was coming right up to me. She should have been able to see whatever had been pushing me. If nothing else, an animal would have cast a visible shadow beneath the glare of her flashlight. But there was nothing. We just could not explain it. Whatever had pushed me, twice, it hadn't been visible to us. As the adrenaline faded, I noticed something else. My back hurt. Right between my shoulder blades, right where I had felt the impact, I could feel a sort of stinging, a prickly sensation. It felt like my back, despite being covered by my sweatshirt, had somehow been brushed with stinging nettles. I mentioned this to my friend, and she insisted on pulling over to the side of the road to look at my back. She switched on the hood light in the car and pulled the collar of my hoodie down to look. I then heard her mutter, "What the?" She took a photo of my back and then showed it to me. The skin between my shoulder blades was reddened, and several little blisters had started to appear. In the days that followed, the blisters would later swell up and pop. It was as if I had somehow gotten a sunburn or a bad chemical burn. There weren't any scratches or cuts. There were no open wounds, no blood. It was a relatively subtle mark, but it was still clearly there, and it baffled us. We certainly couldn't figure out how I had gotten burned. I hadn't rubbed up against anything. I hadn't touched my back. I'd been wearing my hoodie all night, and there were no tears or marks in the fabric. And the burn hurt, and it would continue to sting for several days. I couldn't sleep that night. My back hurt, and every time I started to drift off, I'd suddenly begin to fear that someone was standing over my shoulder, and I would startle awake. I couldn't really understand what had happened at the cemetery, but it truly rattled me. I don't exactly know where I stand on the issues of paranormal phenomena, to be honest. I'm trying to keep an open mind, but I have to rely on a deeply academic and often empirical perspective. Still, I know that something truly bizarre and frightening happened that night, and my inability to explain it, to account for every strange little detail, has been deeply disturbing. It also has been especially difficult to grapple with this, because I already have PTSD from a previous assault, and there's something profoundly unsettling about the fact that, in this instance, there is nothing I could have done to defend myself. And with no clear explanation for it, there is no way for me to prevent something like this from happening again. I cannot cope with a fear that I cannot even begin to understand. It's also begun to affect my dreams. I've had several odd nightmares since the incident in the cemetery. Dreams that are oddly similar to the nightmares that I'd had for years when I was growing up. I don't know where they came from, but for as long as I can remember, I've had dreams in which a creature is attempting to lure me in one way or another. And in the dreams, I usually understand this creature to be a devil or a demon. Simply put, something evil, something dangerous, and like the entity in the graveyard, difficult to understand. These dreams have become suddenly relevant again, as I seem to have them nearly every time I fall asleep these days. I know that, likely due to trauma, hopefully not due to anything more sinister, these dreams and the experience in the graveyard are somehow linked. Sometimes, the menacing creature in my dream takes the form of an old woman. I had one dream when I was about 13 years old in which I was wandering through a forest. I came across a little cottage with this old woman standing by the porch. She beckoned me inside, and I acquiesced. We spent some time casually talking and baking cookies, but I felt uneasy around her, and I got the sense that she wanted something from me. We stayed only in the kitchen throughout the dream, but I can recall glancing at the doorways to the other rooms and seeing nothing but shadowy edges. I thought that perhaps I should try to leave, but I couldn't remember how to find my way out. At one point, as we sat at the kitchen table, I glanced out the window and noticed a group of people standing in the yard, calling out to the old woman. I asked who these people were, and she told me they want me to take them in, but I don't want them. I want you. In other dreams, it's had a more sinister appearance, but I always recognize it as the same creature. I sometimes have dreams in which it is sitting in the dark at my bedside, whispering to me. It has a shadowy appearance with long, lanky limbs and empty eye sockets. Its teeth are made of razor wire, and there's something like blood or wine gleaming on its lips. In those dreams, I can hear it whispering, but I can't understand what it's saying. Sometimes I have dreams of the same creature sitting in a chair in the corner of my room, eating what appears to be a rotten apple. I've long suspected that this creature is some manifestation of my deepest and most troubling fears. I know that these are just dreams, but I mention it because those dreams had subsided in my early 20s, but the incident at the cemetery rattled me so much that they've returned. It seems to have shaken my understanding of the world around me, opening the floodgates to my own inner demons. In these new dreams, the creature is standing upright behind me at the cemetery. Time seems to be slowing down. I can sense my friend frozen ahead of me, and the creature is whispering at my back. I don't really know why my mind is conflating that dream creature with my encounter at the cemetery, but the fear has increasingly kept me up at night. I have no idea what happened that night. My friend believes it was a ghost, but I just don't know. I've just never personally experienced anything like this, and I really don't know what to do with it. I've shared my experience somewhere else, and I'm sharing it here too. First, I apologize for any mistakes I'm going to make in typing because English is not my first language. Before me and my family moved to a newly built house, we used to live in a 25-year-old house, possibly older. I had 15 years of childhood memories in there, some normal and some scary. I've seen a shadow on the wall move towards the kitchen when I was a kid. There were no windows in there, and it was completely impossible for car lights to cast someone's shadow on the wall from the nearest window. The window was in another room. Then, my keychain, which has a plastic skull thing, which had a button, and if you'd pressed it, it would play a laughing sound, it would turn on for no apparent reason. The keychain was hanging on the fridge. I thought my brothers were messing with me, but it was 2 a.m. and no one was there. And my mom would usually see people moving out of the door, and she said that she saw my father and brother going out, but when she asked them, they said they weren't home at the time. And as a kid, I was afraid of going into the yard at night. I always felt as if something was chasing me there, but maybe that was just normal childhood stuff. We renovated the house later. The number of strange things were reduced, but it never ended. My mom used to have bad dreams about the people she knew, and all of them would turn out to be true after a couple of days, or on that very same day. I used to hear glass closet doors being shut. My father built a closet with a glass door, but he removed it after a few months and made a normal wooden door. So I heard the sounds when there was no glass door. And the sounds came exactly from the bedroom where it used to be. I would always have nightmares of being in dark places, with everything in slow motion. I rarely had the dream when I got older, but I would see it daily before going to the new house. And once a piece of bread with salt was found out of nowhere on our rooftop. There was no way for someone to throw it up there because it was a 3-story house. And in my country's culture, it is believed that bread and salt is a tool of witchcraft. So, fast forward to the other 2 freaky things that happened. They happened to me. One was that one night I heard screams from outside, which I guess could have been my imagination. But the second one was not my imagination. I was on the second floor alone watching TV around 3 p.m. I was around 15 years old at the time, when I heard a demonic laugh coming out of the bedroom. I immediately ran downstairs and waited until my parents returned. I never told them because I was too scared to talk about it with anyone, and I thought that if I didn't tell anyone, it wouldn't happen again. This happened literally about 5 minutes ago. Unfortunately, this story is 4 years old. And I'm still outside in my PJs because I'm too scared to go back in the house. Sorry for any errors while I'm typing this out to try to calm myself down. Quick background. I live in an old house and have been here about 2 years, and since I moved in, loads of stuff has happened to myself, my OH, other half, and other people who have visited or stayed over. Things like being touched, footsteps, things moving, falling over, lights turning on and off, shadows and voices. So many things that have made us want to move out, but I'm flat broke and just can't afford it. There is nobody but me in the house, and I'm just hanging up some washing in the utility room. I pick up the laundry basket to hang the socks up and get about halfway through my kitchen, and there's a noise behind me in the utility room. I don't know how to describe it other than a deep, growling scream kind of thing. It was so strange and loud, and I've never in my life heard anything like it. I wish I could explain it better, but I just don't know how. It was such a weird and scary noise. I just kind of froze like a deer caught in headlights. I spun around and stared at the door and walked backwards, until I backed into my front room and ran into the garden. And now, I'm sat here half ashamed for running away, and terrified of what the hell I'm dealing with in my house. I'm horribly aware that I'm alone here for another 8 hours. I think I'm gonna have to go investigate now that I can remember how to breathe again. Wish me luck. As far back as I can remember, I've had paranormal experiences. I like telling some of these experiences when people are telling ghost stories, but I've never written any of them down to share with the world. I never thought people would be interested. My mom was always into the paranormal and witchcraft. My dad told me there were times when she would be doing something and take off running out of the house, screaming for everyone to run. Who knows what she was doing? So I do believe that my mother is the biggest reason I have experienced so much in my life. The first experience I had was when I was about 3. Of course, I don't remember it, but there were several family members present that day, and they have all told me the story. My cousin, my sister, mom, and dad and I were playing hide-and-go-seek. My cousin and sister, both older, it was a small house, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a living room, no attic or basement. There weren't many places to hide. I don't know who was doing the seeking, but I was hiding. I was told that everyone was found except me. Everyone was looking for me behind furniture, in cabinets, in all the closets, under the beds, outside. They couldn't find me, but they could hear me. I don't remember right off what they said they heard me saying. They would go look where they thought they heard my voice coming from, and I wouldn't be there. After about an hour, more or less, I came out from behind an armchair that sat catty-corner in the corner. My dad said he looked behind that chair like 10 times, and I was not there. The first experience I do remember, I was about 5 years old. My grandfather had recently passed away. My sister and I shared a room. We had bunk beds, she was on top. Our beds faced the door. One night, we saw our grandfather in a white suit sitting in our bedroom door. We started whispering back and forth to each other about what we were seeing. He turned his head and looked back at us. He put his finger up to our lips and shushed us. Then one night, we saw a hand reach into our door like it was feeling for the light switch. My sister threw something at it, and it jerked back. In 3rd grade, we lived in a 3-bedroom rental property. One of the bedrooms was painted a deep blue color. I don't know why, but we didn't use this bedroom for a long time. I guess it was because we were told a teenage boy committed suicide in this room. Me and my sister shared the bedroom right beside this room. We always thought that we would hear knocks and loud bangs coming from that room. My sister got tired of sharing a room with me and basically kicked me out, and I had to move into the blue room. My little cousin, who was around 2, was staying with us, and he slept in the room with me. One night, the bed started shaking. Bang, bang, bang. Always in 3s. My cousin woke up screaming that there was a monster shaking the bed. I got him up and took him to my mom and went back to sleep. I had a spirit dog when I was in 6th grade. We had a Scottish Terrier that we named Scotty. I know, creative, right? He always slept with me. He got a really horrible skin infection, and I think my parents had him put down. After he passed, I would be laying in bed and I could hear his little nails clacking on the tile floor and his tags clanking as he ran down the hallway to my room. Then I would feel him jump on the bed and walk up to me and lay down. It made me sad. I missed that little pup. It did eventually stop, though, sadly. We moved a lot, so I spent my 7th and half of my 8th grade year living on the side of a mountain in the middle of nowhere. Our little town was literally a one-stoplight town. My mom always told me not to go into the woods behind the house because there was a cult that did satanic rituals back there, but would make me go out into the pitch-black night to dump scraps. Kind of rude. She also said there was a portal in the front yard, and we had trolls or goblins that came out at night. Her friends would come over, and they would play with the Ouija board and stuff. That place was creepy as hell. My sister ran away from home to be with her boyfriend, and my parents would leave me at home alone after dark. I always felt like something was watching me. One night, I was sitting on the couch watching TV. I was home alone and I could hear my name being called. I could see down the hallway from where I was sitting, which happened to be where the voice was coming from. I turned to look and there was this huge white mist in the hallway. Nope. I acted like I didn't see it and just focused on the TV. In the middle of my 8th grade year, we finally bought a house. Yay. I wouldn't have to move anymore. Or so I thought. Anyways, things picked up a lot in this house. I heard my name all the time. I kept an open Bible in my dresser, and it would always be closed when I went into my room. Things would be moved around or missing. I thought I saw an elf or something standing in my doorway one night. I would feel cold spots, etc. All the usual stuff. The creepiest thing to happen here, though, was one day in the middle of the day, we heard this loud banging on the front door. It was me and my parents home at the time. I was in my room, mom in hers, and stepdad in living room watching TV. The banging was so loud. My mom ran out of her room screaming for no one to open the door, cause if you opened the door, you would let it in. I came out of my room curious to see what was going on. My stepdad muted the TV and yelled, "Who is it?" No answer, of course. Then this thing started running back and forth on the porch, and it was loud. It sounded like it was running on all fours, but it sounded like a freight train on the porch, and it shook the house when it ran. It would come back to the door and beat on the door some more and then run back and forth. This went on for a few moments. My mom was scared to death. My stepdad was getting pissed, thinking it was one of my friends messing with us. He gets up and throws the door open, cussing. When the door opens, a strong wind blew through the house, and the walls looked like they were breathing. My mom was like, "Oh my god, you let it in." They started arguing over it, so I went back to my room. Teenager me didn't care, and was used to this crap by now. She had her friends come over to help her take care of it. We eventually lost that house and moved again. We moved into an older home. I liked this house, but you could really feel the energy here. The atmosphere felt thick, if that makes sense. By this time, my parents were leaving me home alone a lot, especially in the middle of the night. I didn't experience a whole lot here, except you could tell the dog was seeing stuff, and the thermostat always moved. The dog didn't have much to do with me, except when it saw something. Then it would jump in my lap and shake, staring at the ceiling. I moved out, and I got my own place. Everyone came to my place to hang out and party. I was 16, so my friends reveled in the freedom of hanging out with me. One night, I had a few friends over and we were watching Amityville Horror. It was storming out, so it was creepy feeling in there anyways. One of my friends told me to come look into the bathrooms, so me and the other girl go look, and there's a black figure standing in the doorway. It was a very large figure, manly looking. We couldn't make out the features though. There was a bright light shining behind him, and it scared the crap out of all of us, and we all slept in the living room for that night. For 2 weeks after that, random stuff would happen, like a clock radio playing without being plugged in. I called my mom and she said she would take care of it, and then after that, nothing else happened. Fast forward. Moved a few more times. Went through the typical seeing shadows and such. Hearing children's laughter outside of my window, but there were no kids around. Stuff like that. Got married and moved into his place. He told me stories saying that this place was built on an Indian burial ground and that you could see shadows outside the window at night. I never saw anything. We moved from there into a 2-story place. We had twin toddlers at that point. He said that once, some of their bouncy balls came bouncing down the stairs. He had a friend over playing video games and he confirmed the story. The balls were at the bottom of the stairs. Their room was beside the stairs, so the balls would have had to have come out of their room and gone around the railing to get to the stairs. The twins started playing with imaginary friends, setting an extra place for tea and such, giggling and jabbering into thin air, it seemed. I would stay up late to enjoy some peace and quiet, as this was the only time that I got to myself. Their toys would just start going off, and the dolls would speak. This one doll would say, "I love you, Mommy," even though that was not one of its phrases. One day I was washing dishes and looking out the window, and I saw a very large white orb float across the yard, come up on the porch, and come through the front door. I looked towards the front door, and there was a little girl standing there. But then she went away. She followed us when we had to move in with my mom. She started becoming more visible then. One night, the girls were in bed and we were all in the living room. My mom and husband said they had saw a little girl in PJs holding a teddy bear come to the doorway and peek out. Another day I was sitting at the table and my mom was washing dishes. I saw what I thought was one of the girls run out of the laundry room into my mom's bedroom closet. I got up and ran after her because my mom would be mad if they went into her room. She heard me call after her and tell her to get out of Nana's room. She came in after me. We both went into the closet. I turned on the light, and there was no one there. We both just stood there for a moment because I swear I saw one of the girls run in there. Another evening, I was giving the girls a bath, and my husband was at the fire department having a meeting. I thought that I saw him walk by the bathroom into our bedroom. I got up to ask him why he was home so early, but there was no one there. Apparently, the young guy that owned the place before my parents apparently shot himself in the shed. I assumed that was him. Now, my girls are 19, and I haven't had anything go on in several years. The girls swear that they see shadows in their bedroom, and they hear voices in mine, but I haven't. In fact, one of the girls just came out of her room saying that her fan randomly turned on by itself. There was a strange cat locked in the basement once. There are no vents or windows down there, and no one had been down there in a while. Weird things happen here, but not enough to say that this place is haunted. Sorry this was so long, but thanks for reading, and feel free to share your thoughts. Hello. My daughter suggested that I join this site. Here's my story. I lost my very brilliant, witty, overachieving son to opioids almost 5 years ago. He was extremely intelligent, high IQ, a gifted student who graduated college in 3 years. He was self-sufficient with a great job who had a very dark, terrible secret. He became addicted to OxyContin pills in college and managed to hide it for 4 years. His name was Andrew. He was an atheist. He didn't smoke and he rarely drank. I found out about his addiction just 5 weeks before his death and was able to get him into treatment. He would only stay there for 11 days, and I was with him at his apartment the last 6 days of his life. On November 10th, 2014, he gave me 2 red roses. His words, "Because you deserve these, Mom." And I then dropped him off at an AA meeting. But he didn't go to the meeting. He was found 45 minutes later unresponsive in a PetSmart bathroom with a needle in his arm. Since his death, and I cannot remember exactly when it started, I've had roses come into my life, time and time again, in many different forms. I moved to Portland, the Rose City. I adopted a cat. She was already named Rosie. I decided to start photographing 2 roses which appear frequently. I swear, if anyone could figure out how to reach beyond the other world, it would be my brilliant son. They appear randomly, and also on important dates. His birthday, my birthday, Mother's Day. For example, on his birthday in 2016, I was at a thrift store the night before feeling sad and like a loser, really. I had lost my beautiful son to drugs. I frequently beat myself up over this. As I was leaving, I saw 2 red roses in a glass display case. It stopped me in my tracks, and as I looked at it, I saw a little note, "Pull my pin close to you." It was a music box. As I wound it up and pulled the pin, it played "Close to You" by the Carpenters. On the day that you were born, the angels got together and decided to create a dream come true. A song about a birthday. Of course I bought it. I planted a rose bush for Andrew when I moved to Portland in 2015. It has struggled and never really produced much. Last year, in 2018, I noticed it had 2 buds. This bush produced 2 perfect red roses, side by side, that bloomed from Mother's Day to my birthday on May 26th. It had no other flowers that year. It was so odd. My other roses had dozens of blooms. I have countless other signs, sometimes roses, sometimes other unexplained events that leave me wondering. I would like to post the picture here, but maybe I'd have to do a second post. At any rate, this is my story. My sweet Andrew, forever 24, forever loved and missed so very much. Hi guys. So, I was browsing this thread, reading everyone's stories, until I remembered one of my paranormal experiences. It was a few years ago when I was in high school. I was visiting my godmother at the time. Her lungs were in a really bad state, she was sick all the time, and she had pneumonia after pneumonia. We were in bed that night watching TV before going to sleep. She had a large bed, and I was sleeping next to her because she was sick, so I could be there if she needed anything. We turned off the TV and we went to sleep. All of a sudden, I awoke and was overcome with dread. Then, the television turned on by itself. The remote was not near me nor my godmother. Then I looked to her side of the bed and, I kid you not, there was something like a black dog standing there. It had black and shiny eyes. I was completely stunned. I grabbed my phone to distract myself, and it went away. The next morning, my godmother told me that she had an awful nightmare about a black dog. Also, after a while, I was in her apartment alone. I saw a shadow pass through the corridor. I went to check after a while, and the light switch, which I firmly remember I left on in the kitchen, was now turned off. There was a constant atmosphere of negativity and dread. After a year and something, all those things just stopped happening. Does anyone know what those things were? And how did it all go away just all of a sudden? Are those things attracted to negativity? So, I'll give a little background information before I dive into what experience which brought on this question. In May of last year, a boy who I had gone to primary and high school with passed away after a particularly nasty infection spread from a cut on his foot, and it shut down his body, basically. His death rocked the entire school, which he and I, along with many others who basically grew up with him, were all very much affected by his sudden and somewhat unexpected death. I was especially sad over his passing, even though I hadn't been too close to him. So I attended his funeral and spent a few weeks in a numbed state, trying to process his death. This afternoon, I was asleep for a few hours before waking up in what felt like sleep paralysis. Except I could talk and hear myself say things, but I could not move at all. There was a person sitting at the end of my bed, so I asked who they were, and they turned their head to look at me, and it was the boy who had passed away. He and I spoke for a few moments about our school, my life. He gave me some advice on a few things. Finally, I asked him what he was doing there, to which he replied, "Just checking in. I do that quite often to make sure everyone's okay," before joking that it was easier for him to talk to people in this state than when he was in my state. Normally in my sleep paralysis, I always have a sense of dread and fear, but with this one it was very calming, and it felt as though it was a real conversation that I would have had with him. He was very kind, and just sat at the end of my bed playing with his shoelaces. After our conversation was over, he reached over to touch my hand, and he said to me, "My time with you here is over, but I'll make sure to let you know if I come around again. I'll look out for you," which was one of the last things he said to me before he passed, and then said, "Goodbye, for now," before disappearing right in front of me. As soon as he had disappeared, I was able to move again, and sat up in bed. I didn't wake up how I normally do with sleep paralysis. I just sat up and boom, I was awake. I'm a believer in the paranormal, and I believe there is a physical world and a spiritual world, which is where people pass on to when they die. I think that sometimes people's spirits get trapped in a sort of limbo between the two worlds, and that's when we, as beings who are alive, are able to see and communicate with beings who are spirits. I've never heard of an experience quite like this one with sleep paralysis, and I believe that it was the spirit of the boy visiting and checking in on me. Could that be possible? Do some spirits manifest themselves in this way and just randomly pop in for visits and chats? Last year, I started dating a former addict. While we were dating, he relapsed and OD'd multiple times in my house, the worst of which being a very close call in my bedroom where I had to give him CPR, and he possibly had minor brain damage. I ended up getting him to go to rehab, and we broke up immediately after he got out. He died 3 months later. He was in a new relationship at the time, if that matters. The day before he died, I had a nightmare about him ODing again, and it was very realistic. After I found out, I've had more realistic dreams about just talking to him. He told me he doesn't know where he is, that he regrets it, and he doesn't like that animals don't like him around anymore. I eventually told him to stop contacting me while I was in the dream, and they've been much less frequent. The thing is, there's a strange presence in the house since this happened. My current roommate is also an ex, from before I dated the ex I'm writing about, but he didn't live with me until after the breakup. And he's woken up to a figure about my dead ex's height standing over his bed. They used to be tense because my ex didn't like that I was still friends with my other ex and accused me of cheating a lot, which for the record I never did. I see it out of the corner of my eye sometimes. The presence isn't always negative, but it's not really positive either. I feel like I'm being watched sometimes. Sometimes it feels like someone's sitting next to me when I'm sad. Last night is the first time that something concrete has happened. I ended up having a guy in my room. We started making out, and we heard scratching. I checked if the cat had gotten in, but he hadn't. We went back to it, and then suddenly the string lights I have hung in my bedroom were ripped down out of nowhere. There's no real explanation for why it would have happened. The guy kind of freaked out and just asked if it was the cat. The cat was in the other room and my door was closed. He knew about the situation. We've known each other for a long time, so I just told him straight up what I thought was happening. I told my ex to leave me alone out loud, and nothing else has really happened. The guy helped me restring the lights, and none of the nails had fallen either. But I'm not sure what to do now. When my dad was a child, he lived in a red brick rancher by a wood line outside of the town I grew up in. As a kid, in that house, he can recall a seemingly infinite number of bizarre and paranormal occurrences happening to him or other family members, or even strangers who visited the property. Among them was his toy cars and playthings always moving on their own in the basement. The basement of this red brick house was his playroom, and he can recall watching in wonder as trucks and cars would move entirely on their own, with no visible force manipulating them. Years and years go by, he marries my mom, and I'm born. Just as I'm old enough to really be able to talk and speak in sentences, I tell him one day as we play with my toy cars how much fun it is. That it's just like when he and I would play in his house when he was a kid. I told my dad that I remember playing with his toys in the red brick house in the woods. Obviously, there was no way I could have known this at the time, and he was very puzzled at my words. I would also tell him every time he'd clean out his service van what each tool was by its official name and how it's used, and that I used to use them when I was a big person. I told him that I smoked as a big person too. The OP added an update. I asked my dad today if he ever recognized who it was that interacted with him as a kid there, and he said that it could be someone he called Hickory. He said that Hickory was an imaginary friend at that age, and some years later, he found a photograph of a man leaning against a Volkswagen Beetle, and he recognized him without a doubt as his imaginary friend, Hickory. He said that I could have been him. I just found this sub, and I would like to share a rather bizarre experience I had years ago. I've lived in this house for 10 years now. It's a small house, and it's just me, my parents, and our pets. My dad frequently has weird experiences, like someone sitting on the other side of the bed and touching his arm when my mom's not home. but one of the few experiences I had happened about 4 years ago. I would have been 14 at the time. I used to get up at about 6 a.m. just to watch YouTube videos while I ate breakfast. I would be in the kitchen with the door closed, and it would be just me and my dog. I had my earphones on when I heard someone open the bathroom door. I thought this was weird because my mom wasn't home and my dad never gets up this early. I listen for a couple of seconds and don't hear anything. Then I unpause the video. Then I hear someone go into the living room, which is next to the kitchen, and sit on the desk chair, open my dad's laptop, use the keyboards, and then close and open the laptop several times. Then they sat on the sofa, picked up the TV remote, and put them on the glass table several times. Then they would just potter around the room. My dog, at first, was by the door, wiggling his tail. But by this point, he was behind my legs, staring at the door and scared. After about 5 minutes, it stopped. After my breakfast, I opened the door and there was nobody there. I walked into the hallway to see that the bathroom door was closed, and I could hear my dad snoring. After a couple of weeks, this happened again. This time my mom was home, so I thought it was her, but then I heard someone slamming the bathroom cabinets, and I knew that it was this again. I knew that it was the same thing. After that, I started having breakfast in my bedroom, and I still do. Nothing similar has happened since. Are there any thoughts of what this could be? I also wanted to point out that the first time this happened, I woke up scared. I remember not wanting to leave my room, and I just had this bad feeling. Well, it looks like I should have listened to my bad feeling. I used to date this girl named Jessica, but she ran track in school, so everyone called her Speedy. One night we were hanging out at my apartment, just drinking and watching movies. We both passed out pretty early that night. I woke up and noticed Speedy wasn't in bed. I looked out into the hallway and could see a bit of light shining from beneath the bathroom door. Speedy obviously had to use the bathroom. That was my only thought. So I rolled over onto my side and tried to go back to sleep. A few moments later, I heard the toilet flush, the sink turn on and then off, and then the bathroom door slowly open. But what I didn't hear was Speedy's footsteps walking back to the bedroom. So, I turned towards the hallways and could see Speedy's dark, shadowy figure standing in the hall. I sat up and called out to her, "Speedy, come to bed." The shadowy figure instantly sunk straight into the floor. I jumped out of bed, terrified. I had no clue what the hell I had just witnessed. But what's worse is that Speedy was in bed the whole time. To this day, I do not have an explanation for this. But I'm glad that I wasn't alone in the experience, or I would think I was totally insane. I was camping in northern Ontario along the banks of a beautiful lake. There was a dock that spanned about 20 feet over the water's surface, and the perimeter was full of brush and forest. My best friend and I were the only two humans present, stargazing, and talking about everything and nothing. What happened next is burnt into my memories. It lasted less than a full second, but in the midst of our conversation, there was a deafening crack. All at once, the world was illuminated, as if it had suddenly become 12 in the afternoon, as opposed to 12 at night. It was blinding, but each intricate detail of the wilderness around us was suddenly visible. And then, darkness. The conversation halted, stiffened by the shock of what we had just experienced. Slowly, I turned to my best friend as if to silently confirm that she had just seen the same thing I had. The look on her face said it all. We both quietly retreated into our tent without speaking about what we saw until daylight the following day. I don't know if what we witnessed was some kind of supernova, or if it was a different kind of otherworldly experience. Does anyone have any insight? Hey there, friends. That was a collection of some paranormal stories, some terrifying paranormal stories. All of these redone, remade, if you will. These are stories from 2020, specifically the January through February section of that year, which was like 2 months into me doing this channel. All of these stories were fantastic, and honestly, it's why I enjoy doing these, because these are the stories that I started this channel with, if that makes sense. This is where I began, so you knew it could only get more amazing from there, right? Like, starting this good. I mean, my narrations were awful, but starting with these good of stories, you knew it was going to be good, right? And, not to gloat, but I think I'm, like, decent at this. I don't know. Y'all keep telling me I am, so I gotta believe it at some point, right? Anyways, this was a collection of paranormal stories remade for y'all. Not the only paranormal video that will be happening this month, I promise you that. In fact, there's one very soon, and then another one very soon. Look, it's October. It's the month for this kind of stuff, okay? Plus, I love paranormal stories. They're fun. They're interesting, so. If you enjoyed this collection of stories, please do hit that thumbs up button, as it does help tremendously. If you're new to the channel, enjoyed what you heard, and want more scary stories like this, which, come on now, why wouldn't you? You can hit the subscribe button, as it helps the channel a lot. And you can also leave me a comment to let me know your thoughts, which stories you liked, which ones you didn't like, how you're doing. If you've ever had an experience, you can leave it there. If you leave it in the comments, I probably won't narrate it. I will probably read it, but I won't narrate it. So, if you have one you want me to narrate, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. There's a big button center screen that says click here to submit your story, I think, and then it takes you to my Redx page, which is just a submission page, so, yeah. You can also join to get early access to content like this, or go to Patreon and get the membership there. Patreon gets extra stuff depending on what you sign up for, how you sign up. And I promise you, if you join this month, you will get early access to content. This video is going up early. So far, all month, every video has gone up at least 24 hours early. Granted, this is only the third video. But still, I'm 3 for 3. Woo! Anyways, yeah, you get the point. Never expected, always appreciated. And of course, I do hope that I see you again here very soon and that you're having a lovely week. But until I do see you, remember you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And, until I see you again, my friend, much love, and sleep well.